I don't see a lot of V8 here. Are you still not sold on that engine?
I think it's a phenomenally good motor, okay? It does have one drawback in the sense that you can't run really bad, poor fuel through it. It's supposed to be run on 50
That's a
PPI.
game changer in Africa.
Well, it's a big challenge in Africa because your fuel is so varied. You know, you can go to Zimbabwe and your diesel's going to be mixed with paraffin. You know, and you can go to other parts where you're not going to get 50 PPI. So it doesn't mean to say the guys don't use them. In Southern Africa, it's a very popular vehicle, and it certainly has great power. It's lovely to drive. But again, you know, what do I look at? I need to understand, where are my clients going? That's the question you ask yourself. How far deep into Africa are you going, and how much reliability and simplicity do you need? And where are you going to get it fixed if it has a problem? And what's your knowledge if you do have a problem? How much can you help yourself? So part of that knowledge and understanding, so my clients come in and I'm going to go, right, we need to learn about what's under the bonnet here. The very least you need to learn is, what are your daily checks? And the daily check is literally 5 minutes, but it needs to be done every day.
It could save your life as well.
Well, it saves things that go wrong in the car. You know, I've had situations where if you take the time to look at something underneath, okay, so we'll use an example here. One of the daily checks is you've got a clutch reservoir there, you've got a brake reservoir there, you've got your air filter, your radiator, power steering, engine oil, your radiator top-up bottle, your wiper washer. What's critical? What am I looking for when I'm doing my daily checks? I want to make sure that that reservoir, the clutch reservoir, the fluid's full. It takes a second. If it's gone down by half, the likelihood is it's leaking at the slave cylinder down by the gearbox. Most people don't change those. That takes more wear, and because people don't flush that fluid often, it's left. Brake fluid should be flushed every year as part of your maintenance, because it does absorb moisture and it gets tired and it gets a bit of dirt in it. So by keeping that flushed, and if you're going to do preventative maintenance, changing a clutch slave cylinder, that's the 1 weak point, change it. Put a new one on, because then you know, and use a genuine part, so you know you've got good quality, and flush it every year. So then you're going to reduce the challenge of that being a problem. But if I see that that's gone down a little bit, I can then top it up, drive half a day, stop, have a look, it's still on level. Or maybe then I can drive a day. Maybe after 5 days I see it's gone down by half. Now I know every 5 days I must top it up.
Yeah.
I can keep driving with a leak. Once it runs out,
when you run out of fluid.
When you run out of fluid, you then have a problem. You've got air into the system, you've got to bleed it. You need to know how to do that, or you need some help. So that's the advantage of doing the daily check. The same with the brakes. Now brakes are more critical. So when I'm looking at the brake fluid and the reservoir there, and I'm going, that's gone down. So, you know, maybe it's only a short bit, but in a day or 2 days or whatever, I need to make sure. Now I need to go and trace all the brake lines, look at the wheels, look at the brake caliper at the wheel, and check, is there anything leaking? Where is there a leak? Go in the car, look at the pedal, and look inside the car and see if it's wet there, because then maybe the brake master cylinder is leaking, because that telltale will come into the car. So when you look at all those points, it's really because we did a daily check. We say, okay, we know it's leaking, it's going down, how much is it going down, and then I can plan how I fix it. Maybe I've got to order a part in, maybe I need some help. And that's really what you're doing. The other advantage is, like your air filter. I take air filters out of vehicles where people haven't bothered to clean them out. They wait for the service. Now, if you're going to drive in dusty conditions, that raised air intake, that snorkel, is beautiful. It pushes the air in, it really accentuates the flow of air around the air filter. It makes the air filter work better with the turbo and all that, and you want good airflow inside. But if you don't clean it, what's the point of having it? It just gets choked up, and it's like taking a mask on your mouth and getting it all filthy dirty. You can't actually breathe. Well, the same with the engine, except what does it do? It draws in more fuel, and you start washing oil off the pistons and wearing your engine out, and some of the contaminants from the filter, the very, very fine particles may get into the engine. And now it's like taking sand and dust and mixing it with oil and wondering what's going to happen. Okay, so keeping your air filter clean. How do we do that? I take the air filter out. This is the big air filter, okay? It's one of these big round ones. It takes a lot to get that filthy and dirty. So it probably would be a week or 2 weeks of thick, dirt driving. But generally, if I've been driving on dirt roads, every time I fill up, it's 3 clips, take it out, bang it against the wheel, or take it to the guy in the garage there and say, won't you please take my air filter and just blow it out for me. Take a cloth, wipe inside, check it, I'm happy.
With what you use to pump the tyres up?
That actually, the compressor on your tyres doesn't actually blow it out properly.
I mean at a petrol station?
A petrol station,
yeah.
Yes. So if you go to a petrol station and you take that, they've got a big compressor, and I take an old valve stem, just one of the valve stems off the wheel, take one, take the valve out, and then I can actually push that into the airline at the garage, which they normally use to put on your tyres. And now I've got a lot more air, and I can use that with that valve stem, and it blows it out. It's like giving me a nice blower, really. So keep an old valve stem in your ashtray, and when you need to. Now by blowing that out and keeping that clean, you prolong the life of your filter. Some of the other air filters are a flat one. That chokes up much more quickly. So you need to be able to clean it and carry more of them. They're easier to pack, so pack a few more because you're going to go through them. Okay?
Especially if you're number 2 in the convoy.
Yeah. But if you're traveling in convoy, you don't want to be driving in dust. And generally, if I'm driving on a dirt road and someone's going to overtake me, okay, and that's another whole discussion.
You almost want to stop.
No, I actually do. I don't stop, but as he's starting to overtake me, I will actually slowly brake. I don't brake too hard because I don't know what's behind him, but slowly brake so that he actually drives past me.
It's easier to overtake.
And if you are doing that to someone else when you're overtaking, be courteous enough not to just pull straight in front of them, because you pull straight in front of someone and you then throwing up stones and dust, and that's when windscreens get broken and you get very upset when someone's overtaken you. There's a shard of stones showering your windscreen. It's not fun. So yeah, basically, if I take my foot off and then the car overtakes me and I want to get out of his cloud dust, 2 reasons. I want to be able to see what's around me clear, and I want to be sure I'm not getting all the dust into my air filter. Then I'm moving forward and I'm saying, what else am I checking on my day? If it's cold, and the engine's cold, which it normally is when you're doing the daily checks, you can take the radiator cap off, check that it's full. Okay? Check your overflow bottle and make sure it's on the level. Always fill the wiper washer bottle up, because in an emergency you've got some extra water there if you had to use it. Okay? And then I look at the power steering reservoir. Now these can get a little bit of a leak. That's fine. It's not a big deal. But make sure that you check the oil and you're using you've got the correct grade of oil for every component on your car. The axles take a grade of oil, the gearbox a grade of oil. Power steering, you always carry at least half a litre of everything. And make one sure, when you're carrying oil, don't lie the bottles down. Oil leaking into a car, it stinks like hell, especially if it's 9-point gear oil. So I take the small squat bottles that I can stand up in a box. I'll try and buy the ones that are sealed with a foil on them, and I will actually put them in a plastic bag as well. And I'll pack those. And I've got oil that enough to top up, so it's half a litre of brake fluid. It might be a litre of engine oil, depending on how much oil my engine uses. And most old engines will use a bit of oil. That's okay. Monitor that so you know how much oil does your engine use in 1,000 kilometers and in 5,000 kilometers before your next service.
When would you say is the point of using too much oil? How many? If
you're using a liter in 1,000 kilometers, that's quite a lot of oil. But you're going to get telltales.
That's like filling up oil every time you put gas in.
Yeah. And some engines,
Are there some engines that just it works?
And also,
like
you've got to look at some of the older engines. So a lot of these older engines were designed when oils weren't what they were today. So you've got very fancy oils today that are a lot thinner, designed really to try and extend the service life of the oil. Well, we're checking our car every 5,000 kilometers, and in my books, I'd be happy to change my oil every 5,000 kilometers, especially when I'm on a big expedition with a heavy truck and difficult conditions. And so I do. Every 5,000 kilometers, I change my engine oil. I'll change at least the pre-filter, and then maybe the main filter, depending on every 10,000 how many filters you've got. So yeah, let's go back to the engine, the last of the few checks. You've gone right round here. You're going to check your engine oil when it's cold and the car's level, and then you're going to go through and check your pre-filter. That's the engine bay done. And I just look in front here and I see the air conditioning condenser, and I make very sure that that's not full of bugs. If you're driving in long grass, put a seed net over.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as efficient to put a seed net over the front of the bull bar because stuff still gets sucked in. It is better to put it over the front of the grill, but don't leave it there.
But you want to have the right texture,
Well,
so
texture-
it doesn't stop the air coming in.
Exactly. So generally people use in Africa they use a shade cloth, which is strong and quite durable, and it
Like
lets
a
in enough.
20% shade.
Yeah, you know, and I think the big thing is you've got to remember if you're driving slowly in grass, you're not drawing a lot of heat unless you're going in thick sand. So you're trundling along in grass, normally on tracks, and normally the tracks have got what we call the middle section with grass grown up.
Middle monarchy.
Middle monarchy as we call it, yeah. And that's always dangerous because that grass, that as you knock it down, the seeds are for one that get sucked into the air conditioning condenser, and then they also go in between the radiator and the air conditioning condenser. Now a lot of the newer vehicles you'll see they've got foam and they try and keep the radiator and the air conditioning condenser as sealed as possible.
Radiator carries everything.
It's very important. So I have a little brush. It's like one of the brushes you use to clean bottles. Okay, it's long like this, it's wire and it's got little bristles. And if I have to clean between the radiator, I'll use that and I'll just clean that. Don't go and wash it off with water, because the moment you go and add water to grass seeds, they swell and then you can't get them out.
It starts growing in your radiator.
So just keep washing in grass. So that's important, okay? And then you're checking the radiator from this side, the back side. You're looking between the radiator and the air conditioning
You
condenser.
take the cap off and have a look inside.
No, inside no.
For cloggage and, eventually...
You know, if you change your antifreeze
do you
at
flush
least
your
every
thing
2
before the big
years.
trip?
Yeah, so on the routine sort of maintenance and servicing, antifreeze every 2 years minimum. Okay, and it's a 50-50 mix, depending on the conditions and how cold you're going. And I use a good quality antifreeze mixed with distilled water, or if you're in the bush, rainwater. If you have to, you put water in, mix it. But you always want antifreeze in the cooling system. The reason you want antifreeze in the cooling system is it's not just a coolant to keep the engine cool or stop it freezing up. It's a lubricant. It stops rust. It's got big rust inhibitors, so that you don't want particles of rust floating around your engine and eventually ending up in the seal at the water pump, and then your water pump starts leaking. If you look in your engine bay here and you start seeing white sections on here, you can see white particles. It's a telltale. And that's what we're looking for on
That's
your bonnet.
cylinder head damage.
Well, no, it could just be a leak from the water pump. Okay, invariably the water pump has got a small hole. That's what we call the telltale. Okay, and you drive your car. The water pump's got a small leak. You turn the car off. Before the car's cooled down, the water pump leak has just dried up, and you never see it on the ground. Okay, it's got to be quite bad before you see drip, drip, drip on the ground. But you do notice that you're topping up a bit of water. But what you also notice is you see the sediment on, let's say the covers here and around. You're seeing this white sediment, and that's a telltale that there's something leaking here. It could be a water pipe, it could be the radiator, it could be the water pump. So look for telltales. I keep my engine always clean. I wash it, I keep it. I'm happy to put degreasers on, wash it, protect the electrical systems like the alternator, fuse boxes, and properly wash the engine down so that it always keeps clean. Because I can see when there's a problem. So when you're looking after the cooling system, belts are adjusted, fans aren't broken because the blades in the fan, if the blade chips or it's got a piece missing out of it, it becomes unbalanced, and now you're putting a lot more strain on the bearing. And that's what you don't want. You don't want to add extra strain to your water pump. Equally, belts, you often hear you put the air conditioning on and there's a belt that squeals. Now, if it's a new belt, that's fine, because a new belt invariably will stretch a bit. If it's the alternator belts, okay, and you find they're a bit loose, they don't always scream as much, unless they're really loose, there should be a matched pair. So belts that aren't matched have different tensions. So generally when there's two belts on an alternator, you want to get a matched pair, and Toyota will always sell them as a matched pair. I think Terrain will do similar, it'll be a set, okay? And the idea with that is that you've got belts that you can get to the same tension. Now there's a very fine tolerance between having a belt way too tight and too loose because it's slipping. So when you put new belts on and you set them, you will come back and adjust them because they'll stretch slightly. And normally the telltale is you come and you'll hear your alternator belt screaming when you put the the air conditioning on. So you put the air conditioning on, belt squeals, and you go, yes, I need to adjust that. If you over adjust that belt, you're just putting more strain on the bearings. And invariably the bearing will fail over time. So you try not to do that. The same thing as people don't change belts. Belts get older and they get hard from heat and lack of being changed. Of course, we're in a very hot climate. The engine's hot underneath there. And now these old belts, they're not gripping anymore. And what do people do? They just make it tighter. And all you're doing is you're just putting more strain on the bearings. So again, something to be mindful of. So when we're looking at our daily checks that we've done, and we've checked the front cooling system here, think about where you've driven. If you're driving in long grass, you want to be stopping regularly en route and not in the middle of the grass where the grass is all on your exhaust and you stop, because when you turn the key off there's always a surge of heat that comes up, and that's often when, if you've got a lot of grass hooked in around the exhaust and around the engine, you can have it ignite and go into flames. So long grass is actually very dangerous. So for one, if you've got a seed net, you're stopping the seed coming in, but you really want to be sure that you're regularly checking under the car, and you will see it gets caught in all around the exhaust. The Canning was sad to see how many cars were burnt out on the Canning stock route when we drove that. Long grass.
Not Land Rovers.
Oh, well, I think all mixed cars, Yeah, and of course they probably did more travelling on the Canning than in the early days. So that's just something to be really mindful of.
But it reminds me what you always say, things don't start bad, go bad, they start bad. And it's same with engine maintenance and car maintenance.
That whole philosophy of something doesn't go wrong, it starts wrong. If you take that and you think about what it really means,
It applies to life.
It applies. So how often have you been on an expedition where something started wrong that day, and it just seems that it's just compounding? Okay. Now it can be a number of things. It could be your mindset that you are now. This has gone wrong. You woke up, you fell down the ladder, you've hurt your foot, and you've just got this bad mood, and now of course it just sparks and rolls, and because it's getting worse. And it takes a lot to stop and stand back and go, how can I change this? It can be a mindset. It can be, listen, just today we're just not driving anywhere.